We begin with our three-point stance presented by your Mercedes. This is Dave's stance on 3 items of the day. Let's get right into it, shall we, DZ? And your first stance, Dave, Fletcher Cox is a victim of his own success. Interesting one here, Dave.
Yeah, he kind of is, because he was such a dominant player for so long. 6 straight Pro Bowls, second longest streak in franchise history behind some guy named Reggie White. So he's put himself up there as an all-time great player. And when you put that kind of effort forth and you're that good for that long, it's tough to live up to it. And last year, he didn't live up to it. He didn't come close to living up to it. But it's important to remember that this guy is still an above-average player in this league. You can question the Eagles' decision to pay him $14 million this year. It's probably overpaying for the player he is now, but he's still pretty good. And we saw in the second half of the year, really the last 6 games of the year when they made their playoff push, he was a much better player than he was through the first 10 games. He had 1 sack through 10 games. He had 2.5 in the final 6. So still not a super crazy pace, but a much better player. And if he's that guy this year, he'll be okay.
Interesting about the dynamic now between Fletcher and a guy like Jordan Davis, who's coming in as a rookie, and what Fletcher does and kind of shepherding him into the fold. What do you see as the dynamic there between them, and how much do you think Fletcher's leaning on trying to play really well and reclaim his form as opposed to kind of being the leader and mentor to Jordan Davis?
Yeah, he's going to have to do it both, because they're relying on him to bring up Jordan Davis in a certain way, kind of like Kelsey and Cam Jorgens on the other side. Fletcher Cox is going to have a big role and a big say in how this kid comes along, but I think the primary source of motivation for Fletcher this year is going to be to prove that he's still an elite player in the league. I don't know if he'll be able to do that. I don't think he's ever going to be the guy he was in 2018. That was such a high bar, like we talked about. But if he can at least be an above-average player and be a top 10 to 15 defensive tackle in the league, the Eagles will take it. I mean, that's still a really good player on a pretty deep defensive line. If he can be that guy, forget about him being that all-pro, because, look, he's over 30. He's probably not going to get back to that level. But if he can get back to the stage of his career where he's like, all right, he's still a pretty good player, the Eagles will take that.
Did it surprise you at all, the reaction from the fan base when he got cut earlier in the offseason, just to kind of restructure his money? Did it surprise you at the way people were up in arms, considering the down year he had, and people were really upset that he might not be on the team?
Yeah, I think it was a little mixed, though, Danny. I think that, some people see him and they think he's just all-time great player, but other people were like, well, why are they paying him $14 million? That's a top 10 defensive tackle salary in the league. But I'm not even talking about the money here. I'm talking about just the player. And I still think he's an above-average defensive tackle. And he's going to benefit so much by the attention that goes to Javon Hargrave and even Jordan Davis. Forget about Jordan Davis being good. He's going to be good. But even if he's not, he's so massive that he's going to get double-teamed, and that's going to give Fletcher Cox some one-on-ones, and they'll have a chance to win those this year.
Yeah, Javon Hargrave, a great year last year supporting Fletcher Cox in a down season, but we'll see how things play out, like Dave mentioned. In your second stance, Dave, we're going to talk about the running back position, but not Miles Sanders this time. We're talking about Kenny Gainwell, and you say don't forget about Gainwell heading into the year. Tell us why you're focused on him.
Because it's easy to forget about him, because this is an offense now with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders. So you don't want to forget about Kenny Gainwell, though. He played 29% of their offensive snaps last year and put up really good numbers, 6 touchdowns. It was 3rd on the team behind Jalen Hurts and Boston Scott. So he had a big role in year 1, but it wasn't a consistent role. He would have these games where he was really featured in the offense, and then he'd kind of disappear for a week or 2. But I think now with that first year under his belt and that first year in the offense, the role is going to be more consistent this year. And with all the attention on other players, like we're forgetting about Kenny Gainwell, defenses might forget about Kenny Gainwell. He's such a nightmare in terms of mismatches for linebackers out of the backfield that I think he's going to have a chance to have a really good season.
Are you more happy with the team kind of focusing more on giving Miles Sanders more opportunities to kind of reacclimate himself, or do you want to see Kenny Gainwell featured more? How do you see the balance working?
I mean, I really think there's a role for both of them. I don't think it has to be one or the other. Miles is going to be their featured guy. He's going to be the top running back. That's not in question, but really, you look at Indianapolis, we're going to talk about the Colts a little bit later, but what Nyheim Hines has done out there for Frank Reich, it's the exact mold of what Kenny Gainwell can be here, and Nyheim Hines has never been their featured guy. They have other players, whether it was Marlon Mack or now Jonathan Taylor, but he's such a good change of pace player, and he's so good out of the backfield. It's exactly what the Eagles need Kenny Gainwell to be. He's the purest pass catcher out of the backfield, much better than Miles Sanders, and even better than Boston Scott. So he's going to have a role in this offense. And we know Sirianni's all about the matchups. That's a guy who can create some
real
fun
mismatches.
matchups. Yeah.
Real diamond in the rough, Kenny Gainwell. Let's get to your third and final stance, Dave. You say the Eagles keep an eye on the Bears, should keep an eye on the Bears' offensive tackle situation as a possible trade partner for Andre Dillard. Why would he be an ideal player, and why would that be an ideal team to swing a trade with?
Well, that Bears offensive line is a little bit of a mess right now. They have a bunch of competitions at a bunch of different spots, and their left tackle competition is really between two fifth-round picks, their fifth-rounder from last year and their fifth-rounder this year. So if you're looking around and saying, all right, Justin Fields is our quarterback, well, they better protect him. So would they be willing to trade a mid-round pick for Andre Dillard? I would think they would be, especially if they get to camp and look at these two guys and go, oh, this isn't working out. And I have a connection for you, Danny.
What's that?
Ian Cunningham,
okay.
The Eagles' former director of player personnel, really kind of majored in the college scouting department here in Philadelphia. He's now the assistant GM in Chicago. So there's some familiarity with him. He helped in the process of scouting Andre Dillard when they drafted him in 2019. So easy to make that connection. That's a spot that would make a lot of sense for him.
What should the Eagles be trying to target in return from the Bears?
I think a conditional pick makes sense here because it's a player who has struggled to stay healthy and he's struggled to prove himself in the league. So if there's some conditions on that pick, he has to start X amount of games, and the pick, call it a conditional 5, right? It's a fifth-round pick, but it can become a 4 if he starts X amount of games this coming season.